What the fuck is up, world? Biali Tlaltic back. We back in this bitch. Another podcast for that ass. Another Grito, sea dicho. Coming about 2 weeks now since my previous podcast. I meant to get one out to you all last week, but yeah, I was still recovering from the fucking COVID hangover, bro. And while the material that I was able to drop for the week that I actually had COVID was already prepared, I didn't have a podcast prepared for last week, and I considered briefly just fucking jumping on this bitch and fucking going off the cuff like back in the day when I first started this motherfucker. But I said, nah, homie, y'all motherfuckers are investing your time and your energy into listening to this shit. So the very least that I could do is prepare a fucking product that is worth your fucking time and energy. You know what I mean? So I said, let's just fucking pump the brakes and we'll come back to it in about next Sunday. Next Sunday's episode is Sunday today. For those of you, whenever it is that you're listening to it, today for me is the 23rd of January, right? So anyways, what's good? It's good to be back. It's good to be just dropping this podcast shit, dog. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. And if not, I hope, like I've said plenty of times, that inevitably you do find a podcast or anything in life really that will bring you the joy and satisfaction that is inherent just with being a human being, the kind of shit that is possible just with, being a human being. And I know this might sound fucking grandiose, I guess is one way to put it. But I guess I'm not trying to sound overtly, gratuitously fucking like just grandiose, okay? It's actually in line with the material that I'm going to be discussing today with the podcast, all right? Before I get into it, though, let's just get the semantics out the way. You already know the deal on the socials, OG_IceNice13 on the gram, and something along the same lines on the other socials, even though I don't really use them. But, if I do get fucking zucked off the gram, which, is an always ever present threat, you'll know where to find me. Speaking of the gram, you can also find me on the backup. I don't use it, but it's there. OG.IceNice13 in case the OG_IceNice13 gets zucked, right? And yeah, so that's for those of y'all who are tuning in just from the fucking podcast itself. For those of you who are actually tuning in from the socials, what's good, fam? Right? I see you. I see all you motherfuckers, irrespective of how you're tuning into this motherfucker. And I'll just let you know that, again, as always, I appreciate the fuck out of it, okay? So with that said, let's just get straight to it, homie, because I got a lot of shit that I want to talk about today, right? And I want to be mindful of your time regardless. And I guess the best place to pick it up is on what it was that I was discussing before I got through the whole fucking semantics, and that is the seemingly gratuitous nature of my fucking little monologue about how dope life can potentially be. And the reason why I started with that is because I know I talk a lot of shit, dog, about how life can be meaningless, right? But I hope truly, if you've been listening to this podcast long enough, that you understand that realistically, dog, that's nothing more than my gallows humor, okay? Especially like on the gram, for those of you who do follow on the socials, when I'm posting those fucking memes, bro, it's tongue in cheek, homie. Like it's fucking, at least, for me it is. I'm sure there are other people out there who, maybe some of them are fucking, they're serious about it. But I'm 10 times out of 9, dog, I would say that the people who post that kind of shit on socials, myself included, it's tongue in cheek, homie. You know what I mean? It's meant to just be a way to fucking deal with the pressure of the seeming, I say seeming because it's like a Western thing, right? But the seeming absurdity of existence and, having a good laugh at it, it fucking never hurt nobody, dog. So, again, I hope that by this point you understand that at least. And if not, I'm trying to make it a point to let it be known that it's mostly just my gallows humor, dog. That's not to say that I'm always feeling 100%, that I'm always in a chipper ass attitude. Of course not, dog. We all go through our fucking moments. You know what I mean? Ups and downs, and I'm no fucking exception, and I'm okay with that. You know what I'm saying? So like sometimes it is like, damn, this shit sucks. You know what I mean? I'm not always in that space where I think of it like as a fucking treasure and all that kind of stuff. But even in the most fucking gloomiest and fucking desperate of places that we all can potentially find ourselves in, I still find a little bit of hope and fucking promise and meaning and all that kind of shit. You know what I mean? And the gallows humor is undoubtedly what helps pull me out of that fucking out of that space. You know what I mean? And that is, I'm thankful for that because in reality, I do think that life is a treasure, dog. The likes of which, me personally, I don't have the ability to capture and commit to paper or to spoken word in such a way that would ever truly do it, justice. You know what I mean? You have these great existential philosophers, chief among which like written word. I would put Nezahualcóyotl of the, the Mexica tradition up there, or the Nahuatl tradition, I should say. And I would put fucking Kierkegaard up there in the Western tradition, dog. Just beautiful fucking poets and artists, writers, you know what I mean? That have an amazing talent of being able to capture the essence of existence here on Tlalticpac. And I'm not one of them, you know what I mean? But it doesn't mean that I don't fucking feel that I don't feel that passion nonetheless, homie. And so what I'm trying to say is, like, I'll never be able to do it, capture it in such a way that'll do it justice. You know what I mean? However, at the same time, I do understand also, like I said earlier, that life is suffering, homie. And moreover, that it's a constant battle, if you will. It's a constant, at this point, I've made it perfectly clear. So I'm just going to, skim through this idea quickly. And that is that it's a constant battle against specifically the suffering, right? The suffering of life. And this is like the fucking one of the four noble truths in the Buddhist tradition. Life is suffering. You just got to accept that shit. You know what I mean? And learning to fucking rebel, if you will, to use the Camusian language, is part of the fucking meaning, at least that I found in life. You know what I mean? And this, suffering, it takes the shape of many different forms, dog, whether it be oppression, injustice, or simply something in our own mind. Like our own mind is fucking causing us suffering. It's the oppression of our negative thoughts, of the evils, if you will, in our own mind. You know what I mean? So I guess in that respect, that's kind of when I talk about like being a warrior. Again, just picking up on the Nahuatl tradition of philosophy. That's kind of what I mean when I say that I'm a warrior in life. Okay, not because I've ever fucking had to kill people necessarily in order to defend a homeland or something like we've typically associated with what a warrior is, but rather because I prepare every day to battle against the suffering of life itself. Because again, I truly do believe that fighting for it, the value of life, life and the value thereof, is what makes it worth living, homie. Right? Now, what this comes on is the heels of the pit of nihilistic despair that I was engulfed in back in the day, when I reached the point, at the end point, I should say, the zenith of Western Christian epistemology, right? I've talked about this before at length, and I'm just going to skim through it here briefly just to set the foundation for this particular episode. So, on pain of reiteration, it's the whole death of God shit, dog, and the ensuing nihilism that arises because of it. And, I talked about how for the longest time, I let this be reason enough to not feel the need to do anything, essentially, dooming myself and my desires in life to this fatalistic Western reductive Christian outlook, right? And assume that this was in fact the end of the journey. So if you think about it in terms of like game theory, dog, there's only one potentiality that you can arise to when it comes to this Western Christian epistemology. And that is reductive materialism, which ultimately ends with the fucking pit of nihilistic despair. The other alternative, of course, is just to accept Christianity. But, that's philosophical suicide, bro. That's what Camus tells us. It's philosophical suicide, to just accept some given answer in the world to take away the seeming suffering inherent when you come to this inevitable conclusion, which, comforting though it may be for some people, for those of us who are philosophically inclined, it's akin to philosophical suicide, because you're just killing essentially all desire to question any further for the sake of feeling some sort of comfort, irrespective of how fake it may be, right? So that's not an option, dog. So when you think about it in terms of the game theory, those are the two options that you get to. You can either commit philosophical suicide, or you can allow yourself to be enmeshed in this pit of nihilistic despair because of the reductive Western materialism, right? And that's an inevitability. That's the end point when it comes to this Western Christianity. And I got there around my my mid-20s, and by the time I was 30 for sure, right? And I remember thinking to myself, like, damn, this is really it, huh? There's really nothing more to life than this reductive materialistic world. That shit is whack, yo. And of course, from there is where all the questioning about the meaning of life and the purpose of continuing, that's where there arises from. Now, to be fair, I'd gotten to that point long before, but for different reasons. You know what I mean? But now you get to it for a complete other reason, and that is the seeming lack of meaning and purpose in life. You know what I mean? Something that really fucking eats at motherfuckers like myself, going through it at the moment, just thinking about my place on Tlalticpac, the meaning of my work and what I'm doing, you know what I mean? And all that kind of shit. And of course, it's from here where all the questions about the meaning of life and, again, the purpose of continuing where it comes from, dog. So this is specifically where Camus, this is where he made his bread and butter, homie. And as much as I'll forever treasure the impact that he had on my life, I'm at a point now where I realize that he himself, he kind of fell victim to the idea of this was it. You know what I mean? This idea of the end of the Western Christian world, a zenith point, if you will. And like Camus, I myself, obviously, I'm sure probably you have too. I got to this point, dog. But unlike Camus, thankfully for myself, that I had another epistemology to fall. Now, to be fair, I had another epistemology to fall back on, but so did Camus. All he had to do was fucking look outside of the Western tradition, which obviously many of the Western tradition philosophers, they just don't do, okay? Because they have themselves fallen victim to the idea that the only philosophy is Western Christian philosophy, and then we just kind of use this model, or rather we use this as the justification to continue along this fucking shitty modality of reality that we've allowed ourselves to be fucking subsumed into. We just kind of, shrug our shoulders and be like, well, this is it. We might as well do the best of it. To which the idea is like, nah, dog, it's not it. And, a new, better world can be built. And that's going to be kind of the idea that we work towards here. But for now, for me, I really started to understand the importance of indigenizing, okay? And more specifically, the importance of letting go of the reductive Western material world that I'd been indoctrinated in and that I felt obligated, if you will, to uphold out of fear specifically of being ostracized, dog, like of being told, you're fucking crazy, bro. Like, get the fuck away from me. You know what I mean? All that typical shit that, existential philosophy and critical theory tell us, like, yeah, you should probably avoid those kind of people anyways, because they're just going to drag you down in the end, homie. They're going to strip you of the ability to enjoy this fucking one existence, this one shot, ideally, that we have at existence. We don't believe in it. Nahuatl philosophy, we don't believe in, just one shot type shit. And that's Western Christianity. We won't remember how we come back, but we coming back in this bitch because it's just an inevitability, right? Anyways, all I had to do, I started to realize the importance of letting go of this fucking Western Christian world, dog. It didn't matter if I was going to be ostracized for it, okay? Because it's when I started to... When you get to this point, dog, the Western reductive world, materialism world, obviously you're going to get to this fucking zenith point that I've been talking about. And then you're going to get to the inevitable questions of, is life worth living? What am I doing? Why should I even continue? And so on, right? What's the point of it all? And it's very difficult to escape from that trap, bro. But thankfully for me, I had the indigenous Nahuatl philosophy to rescue me from that, which is why I'm trying to share it with you all too, in hopes of being able to do so. Specifically because it was this Nahuatl philosophy that helped me realize, first of all, dog, I'm not a nihilist. I'm a fucking Nahuatl, okay? There's a huge difference between the two, and I'm going to talk about it here shortly. The second thing that it helped me realize is that my biggest fear was never that life was not worth living or that life did not have any sort of meaning and purpose and value. My biggest fear instead was that life was full of meaning, dog. My biggest fear was that life was full of meaning and that I was afraid of this fact, okay? That I was afraid of the fact that life was full of meaning. And, even more so, I was afraid of the fact that I wasn't doing anything on my behalf to actualize my meaning and purpose here on Tlaltikpak because I had allowed myself to fall victim to this Western reductive world and use that pit of nihilistic despair that it leads to as an excuse to not have to do anything with my life. Because if the sun's going to explode, if I'm going to die and so on, what the fuck is the point of anything, right? Wrong, homie. And it was the Nahuatl philosophy that helped me realize this, right? Helped me realize, again, I'm not a nihilist, dog. I'm a fucking Nahuatl, homie. Okay? I come to understood that, what I'm trying to say is that, this Nahuatl philosophy, it helped me realize that life, it does in fact have meaning and purpose, dog. And that meaning, again, is to reiterate, it's to battle until the very end, homie. It's, to rebel, if you will, to use the Camusian language. But his idea of rebelling and my idea of battling, the Nahuatl idea of battling, they're very dissimilar in many ways, okay? So I wouldn't just reduce it to this Camusian understanding because I'm just here fucking dropping Camusian philosophy. I'm not really contributing anything, dog. And that's kind of the point. There's many motherfuckers that you can go out there to listen their reiteration of Camus. You could read Camus himself, primary source. You know what I mean? So what I'm trying to say is I'm not trying to give you Camusian philosophy because my shit is different from Camusian philosophy. It's influenced by Camusian philosophy, but it's fucking different nonetheless, homie. Because again, this Camusian philosophy, for better or worse, it accepts as its ultimate endpoint the reductive Christian world. And what I'm saying is that, yeah, I got there. Camus helped push me along the way in many instances, okay? But I'm trying to get out, homie. And I honestly don't think Camus got out. I don't think the answer of just rebel against the absurd is a fucking satisfactory conclusion because it leaves a lot. There's a lot to be there's a lot unanswered in this idea of just simply rebelling against the absurd, simply rolling the boulder up and down the hill. Chief among which being, what meaning and purpose are you going to have for rolling the boulder up the hill, right? Excuse me. What I mean by that specifically is the rolling the boulder up and down the hill, it's a metaphor, obviously, right? But if you're just doing the same typical 9 to 5 shit that Camus talks about and, the myth of Sisyphus, realistically, there's no meaning and purpose behind that, which is why I find that so many people, they make the memes mocking this fucking Camusian character where they say, oh, you must imagine Sisyphus happy. Well, of course he's not happy. He's just doing it for no fucking other reason than, if you ask me personally, the motherfucker's afraid of dying. You know what I mean? So what I'm trying to say is that for my purposes, like, nah, dog, yeah, I don't mind rolling the boulder up and down the hill, but as long as I know what it is that what the boulder it is that I'm rolling the hill up, or what the boulder is rather that I am rolling up and down the hill, and why it is that I am doing so. You know what I mean? I've mentioned it before, but it bears repeating. I don't mind suffering. I have no problem with suffering. What I do mind is needless suffering for no fucking reason at all whatsoever, such as the suffering inherent with just working a fucking 9 to 5 meaningless existence, stripped of any meaning, pleasure, or joy whatsoever. That I do mind. You know what I mean? That's the kind of shit that drives me crazy, homie. That drives us crazy, I'm sure. Anyways, so when I talk about this fucking battle, I'm not just talking about just mindlessly rolling this boulder up and down the hill, dog. I'm fucking, nah, homie. I'm talking about the internal conflict necessary with finding what it is that our own personal boulder is, and why it is that we're rolling it up the fucking hill, okay? Not just fucking accepting it as a default and keeping it moving because we're afraid of, what lies on the other side of life. So, the point that I'm trying to get to then is that this is a battle. This is a constant battle. It's something that we're going to go through for the entirety of our existence. And the goal is to just not only understand and recognize this, but to treat this fucking reality in such a way where we continue to battle until, again, we arrive at our final resting place in such a way that when we do, we're tired, homie. We're beaten, but, we're never, ever fucking defeated, right? That when we do arrive at this fucking place, that we do so not with fucking fear of death, not with the fear of death or the fear of dying in our hearts, but rather with the acceptance of knowing that we did so as valiantly as we fucking possibly could, while we could, for as long as we could. And then when the time does come, to be at peace with this fact, and that, that there is no longer any more time to do anything with this fucking fleeting experience of reality, right? There's this great poem by the indigenous chief Tecumseh, right? And I'm going to summarize it. Briefly, but the basic gist is the goal is that, to learn. The goal is, to learn to live a life, right? That the fear of death can never enter our hearts, to love our lives, to perfect our lives, to beautify all things in life. The goal is to seek to make our lives long and in the service of other people, so that when it comes time to die, Chief Tecumseh tells us, we will not do so like those whose hearts are filled with the fear of death. And that, so that when the time comes, these people, he tells us, they weep and pray for a little more time to live their lives over again, but in a different way this time. The basic gist is like, nah, homie, that's not the goal. The goal is to arrive at the complete opposite of that perspective, okay? The goal is to live in such a way that we can sing our song of death, right? And that we can die like a hero going home, homie. And obviously, this is only possible if we, continue to battle, if you will, to use a terrible analogy, for what it is that is going to make us the hero in our own fucking, story, if you will. So again, this is one of the, just to contrast it from the Camusian philosophy, like I personally feel that there's just, it's basically hedonism, homie. Like it's a very poetic hedonism in the sense that just, like enjoy yourself, like live your life. Life doesn't have meaning or purpose. You're okay with that. Just do what thou wilt, basically type of shit, right? And this Nahuatl philosophy is like, nah, dog, you have a purpose and you have a meaning. You have a heart and a face, if you will, just jumping ahead. And you got to find that heart and a face and you got to make both strong so you can manifest your purpose. And, when the time does come for you to meet your demise, you'll do so in a way where you're not afraid. You're content with what it is. Okay. So upon realizing all of this shit, it's when I started to understand that the goal for me personally was to help spread my hood philosophy, bro, in a way that would, hopefully help others the way that it has helped me. And to do so, unrelentingly until my time to return home, right, comes. And that, when it does come, I'm ready to enjoy the rest that I've hopefully earned at that point. Okay. And that I'd be at peace with at peace rather, with leaving behind my loved ones, right? Leaving them behind, knowing that, their time to rejoin me is going to come inevitably. Okay. And until then, it's just their turn, dog. They got to close ranks and continue to battle until, it's their time to join home, to come home as well. Now, part of that, at least for me personally, implied, again, that it meant that I had to break with the Western tradition of philosophy. And that, it was difficult because not only did I spend my entire life being socialized in this Western Christian world, but as far as the philosophy is concerned, I had been trained for basically my entire young life to be that type of philosopher. You know what I mean? This was an interesting realization for me because, I don't know, man. It's just layers to this shit. You know what I mean? There's layers to it. I struggle with mentioning it because of how this is a little personal, right? But I guess this whole fucking podcast is fucking just personal shit anyways. Who gives a fuck, right? But the idea was that when I came to this realization, I was honestly a little bit disappointed, dog. I was like, damn, that's my fucking meaning and purpose in life, bro. I mean, philosophy itself is already fucking like such an esoteric study. It's such a fucking fringe study for many people. You know what I mean? Everyone's a philosopher, dog, when it comes to questioning life. When it comes to studying it, they're like, you know what I mean? And right, understandably so. I ain't hating. Don't get me twisted. I'm just saying, like, it's already such a small subset of the fucking of the world population. And on top of that, rallying against the Western Christian tradition of philosophy within philosophy is an even fucking smaller subset. So it's just like when I came to this realization, I was kind of a little bit disappointed. Like, damn, that's my meaning and purpose, dog. It seems so infinitesimal. It seems so fucking non-important. You know what I mean? And it kind of caused like a little bit of a existential crisis, if you will, right? Because like everyone else, dog, I'm like everyone else. You know what I mean? I always thought that I was going to grow up and be someone hugely important, if you will, in the unfolding of human affairs. And, while I was initially disappointed when I realized that, actually, you're just going to talk shit about fucking Western philosophy to a very, fringe group of people within an even fringer group of society. You know what I mean? It was a little bit tough at first. You know what I mean? But after I started to embrace this this path that I guess, if you will, that I'm on, that I discovered from everything that led up to my life at that point. You know what I mean? I was happy to know that at least for the very first time in my life, I at least had a fucking meaning and purpose. And perhaps more importantly, it was one that I had discovered entirely on my own. What do I mean by that? As I mentioned before in the previous podcast, it was not something that was given to me by an external entity, which obviously is critically important because if it's given to you by an external entity, it can be taken away from you as well. It does not belong to you. It is not yours. You know what I mean? And so with this particular understanding, I was actually very happy, despite how fucking marginal my impact will be. You know what I mean? I was happy to know that for the first time ever in my life, I personally had found my meaning, my purpose. Not my only meaning and purpose, but this is what I'm fucking doing, dog. This is my life here. You know what I mean? It's not going to lead to the fucking grand fucking unfolding and culmination of some, culturally significant event, but that's okay. Like, it's going to be enough of an impact where the people that it does, that you do share it with, hopefully will be, they'll find some happiness or some sort of peace of mind in what it is that you're sharing. You know what I mean? Again, I'm trying to sound grandiose, but I'm just saying, like, I'm very cognizant of the fact that, my shit is not the typical philosophical shit that most people are aware with. And, it's the reason here being is because I feel as though I personally have something to offer that those philosophers don't. So, it's just an acknowledgement and an understanding of this fact, right? Anyways, fast forwarding just a little bit, okay? It was the understanding about this whole point finally arriving at this, deep introspection of what my purpose was and who I was as a person, right? What my life had been leading up to and where ideally I would like for it to go. When this happens, of course, I come to the realization that obviously my point, part of it at least, is going to be to help reanimate my ancestral philosophy, okay? Because I'm convinced, homie, that obviously, like I just told you, that I not only have something to offer you by way of hood philosophy, but also by way of reanimating the ancestral philosophy. Because I do believe that it can, in fact, change the world, dog. It's Nahuatl philosophy. I do believe that it can change the world, right? And it could change it for the better. It can help us make the world the better world that we all desire, And that obviously this is only going to be possible with the complete destruction of the Western epistemology and the ensuing construction of a new, better philosophy upon which the new, better world we all desire can be built upon, right? So when I talk like epistemic foundations and shit, for those of you who follow along with the podcast, I like to, liken it to building a house, right? I like to liken the idea of an epistemic foundation to building a house. And the idea here being is that when you're building a house, obviously you got to start with a very strong foundation, because if you don't have a strong foundation, it doesn't matter how beautiful, the house and how ornate the house may be, it's going to come crumbling down, because the foundation, the ugly shit that no one ever sees or even considers, for the most part, is the most important part. Okay. Anyways, the point is that the house, the fucking foundation, is the most important part of any house, right? And if you don't have a strong foundation, it's such a matter of time before fucking that whole Miley Cyrus shit, dog. I came in like a wrecking ball. In this case, the fucking wrecking ball is the obvious fucking zenith of the Western Christian world, which again is the problem of nihilism, right? And it's just a matter of time before that fucking wrecking ball destroys the whole fucking house, okay? And the point then is that the foundation that our epistemology is built on, the Western Christian epistemology, it's a fucking terrible foundation, dog. It's been a terrible foundation from the get-go. It's fucking been rotten and decayed. The house is obviously crumbling down now. Just look around and see the fucking global current affairs, and you'll see that the old world is slowly being deconstructed and dismantled, and a new world, for the better or the worse, is slowly being rebuilt. This new world order, if you will, right? Now, this ain't just me fucking spitting some bitter outsider shit, homie. This is the entire point of, Who the fuck is Nickley? I don't know. Nietzsche's proclamation that God is dead, right? So the point is to build a new world on this decaying foundation. You're going to doom it, dog. You're going to doom it to the same cycles that led it to that point in the first place, all right? Which would include all of the suffering, to which I'm like, nah, homie, I'm not with that, right? The old world is dying, and fucking for the better, right? And we're at this critical point in fucking human history where we can either zig or we can zag. And if we zig on one hand, we have the ability to reshape the world in a fucking radically new, better way. And if we zag, we have the potential, my fucking fear of sliding into one of the most repressive fucking times that have ever existed in the scope of humanity, right? So this hood philosophy shit, then, it's a forward-looking philosophy in a way, homie, in that it reaches into the past to help guide us into this future that, I know me personally, and probably you too, desire. We don't want to go down this technocratic, elite, fucking globalist fucking world, dog. We don't, okay? We don't even want to go down this old Western Christian reductive materialism world anymore. We're done with that. We're moving on to a new, better world, okay? And the only way that we can do so is to inform it with a philosophy that doesn't fucking serve as the as the foundation for the epistemic foundation of the current world that we have now. This ancient Greek philosophy is the foundation of Western Christianity. So it only stands to reason that if we're trying to get rid of this Western reductive Christian world, we got to get rid of that which it rests upon, which is the Western Christian, or rather the Western Greek tradition of philosophy. So how do we do that? We replace it with a complete different philosophy, to which all these fucking racist academic fucks will say, no, that's not real philosophy, to which obviously I'll say, fuck you, right? Anyways, the point is that this hood philosophy is just one of many potential philosophies, dog, that can, I believe, help do this, right? And this starts, of course, with picking up the role of Nahuatl philosophers. Like, if it's fucking influenced by Nahuatl philosophy, obviously you got to pick up the role of the people who created the Nahuatl philosophy, which is the Tlamatini, the Nahuatl philosophers. And you got to keep moving it forward, right? Now, it's not the exact Nahuatl philosophy, because I'm not living in the exact Nahuatl times anymore. I'm living here today in fucking Western Christian world, 2022, fucking January, the late January. You know what I mean? Like, this is a complete different world than anybody that ever came before us, including Camus, Nietzsche, Sartre, and the like. You know what I mean? Let alone our ancestral Mexica philosophers who were 500 years removed from us. You know what I mean? So the whole point then is that we fucking, that's who we are, dog. This is what we Chicanx people are. This is Chicano and Chicana people is who we are. We are a fucking mixture. You know what I mean? We mix the fucking present world that we're living in with the ancestral world of the past, and we use their knowledge to help guide us into the future. We reanimate that knowledge to help guide us into the future. You know what I mean? So anyways, as I've mentioned before in previous episodes of the podcast, Nahuatl philosophy, it has a completely different start and endpoint than the Western world. Now, as a quick reminder, the Tlamatini, they took as a point of departure the ephemeral and fragile quality of all that exists from their philosophy, okay? Why? Because in this ephemerality is where the biggest threat to truth resides, the biggest threat to meaning and purpose exists, okay? And that is the lack of truth. Because without any sort of fixed truth, as I mentioned before, there is no meaning and purpose that can be had, okay? So this is where the Nahuatl Tlamatini, this is where their philosophy starts, okay? And in my personal opinion, like all true spiritual gangsters, we begin first here because we cannot understand how life can have meaning and purpose, let alone claw ourselves out of the pit of nihilistic despair without doing so first. You got to first ask yourself, like, what the fuck is the point of everything that it is that I'm doing to begin with? It's not an easy question to ask. It may not yield comfortable results, but it's the absolute most important question to do, because to consider, because this is the most pressing issue. It's like an innate pressure that most human beings experience. This pressure of meaning and purpose and what it is that we're doing with our life. You know what I mean? And the longer it is that this pressure goes unacknowledged, the more and more it builds up to the point where we literally feel like we're going to fucking explode. You know what I mean? So in order to fucking consider this, the Nahuatl philosophy then, it starts first by posing two questions, homie. The first of which being whether there was, whether there was ever anything really worth saving, striving for rather, here on Tlalticpac, okay? And the second question was simply, do we perhaps speak any truth? I've mentioned this before. I've mentioned it again. There's a whole podcast dedicated to this particular saying. Azotle Neli in Tlalticpac. Is this the only truth on earth? Okay? Now, again, this is important because since truth is what gives foundation to all things, this second question leads to two even more urgent problems. And the first of which is whether things and men, like, people, I should say, whether we have any real truth or foundation, or are we merely quote unquote dreamlike? Now, I want to pause here because it's important to note that as far as Nahuatl philosophy is concerned, this particular element is cause for mad tension, the question of dreamlike statuses in Nahuatl philosophy. Specifically what it was meant by them, okay? Because obviously the people who were initially transcribing Nahuatl philosophy, they were fucking into European languages. They were Christians, bro, obviously. And because of that, they operated in a Platonic way that not only distinguished between dream and waking consciousness, but also between, the quote unquote real and not real. Now, again, this is a mad complex idea, dog, that, it deserves its own treatment. But, for our sake, it's important to note only today that, as monists, there is no distinction between anything, right? It's all one, homie, including dreams and waking life. So as a monist, when we talk about, dreamlike, we're not talking about something that doesn't not exist, all right? That's something that doesn't exist. So much as, we are the fleeting experience of this reality that is akin to a dream. So in order to understand this, you got to understand how the Nahuatl did their philosophy. They did it to what is referred to in Spanish as floricanto, right? It's basically an aphorism. In Sochi, in Cuicat is how you would say it in Nahuatl. And the basic idea is that it's a poem, poetry, aphorisms that help us express and explain the truths, if you will, of reality. Okay. And so what they say that when they're saying that life is dreamlike, they're using it as a metaphor to explain our existence here on earth. Not that it's not real so much as that it's fucking fleeting, and like a dream will inevitably come to an end. And like a dream, we struggle sometimes to make sense of it all. And we're, just trying to piece it together while it's constantly moving forward to its ultimate destination, because, the nature of teot is constant movement and flux, etc. So like, a dream, teot, or rather like teot, a dream and life ensuingly is in a constant state of movement towards the inevitable, what we would take to be as the quote unquote end, but it's not really the end because there is no death. It's just the transitioning from, this dynamic of life to the other, right? So again, super complex idea, deserves its own fucking treatment. But for now, Okay, for this particular episode, it simply implies that truth can, ideally, be real, although it will be subjective, right? Now, it's not going to be subjective in a way that's, commonly associated with in the Western world. And that is with like morality and shit. But, where they say that what's okay for Americans or Americans can have a complete different set of moralities than, people in the Middle East, and how dare either one of them fucking try to impose their morality on the other. Although it seems to be a little bit more tilted towards the Americans. They get the most wrath about, imposing their culture and traditions on the Middle East, because obviously that's the current zeitgeist, if you will, the push of history in terms of how cultural affairs are unfolding, right? Everything America bad, everything other cultures good, irrespective of how seemingly backwards they may be. That's the whole point of subjectivism, relativism. And it's part of the reason why it gets such a fucking shit rap among people, because it's obvious that, at least intuitively, that some cultural practices are perhaps a little bit more advanced, if you will, than others. Now, this is obviously there's a lot of tension in that statement, right? Because again, who the fuck am I to say which culture has more value and all that kind of shit? Like, yes, I get all of that. Okay. But, when it comes to shit like, I don't know, man, fucking murder. Some cultures will say that does not qualify as murder. That qualifies as an honor killing. While other cultures will say that does not qualify as murder. That qualifies as a police fucking doing his job. It's just, it's a complex fucking conversation, right? And again, not the point of this podcast, which is why I'm kind of just skimming through it. But the whole point is that is not what is happening here with the Nahuatl philosophies, okay? With the Nahuatl philosophy. What they are saying is that rather subjective, what they're saying is that the truth is subjective in that it varies among individuals, because each one of us has our own truth that we must discover and live up to. So just to fucking cut quickly to the point, the whole idea is like, my truth was to do this, to give my hood philosophy, to reach into the past and reanimate my ancestral philosophy and fucking remix it in a way that I would hope is fucking culturally relevant enough to be able to inspire, if even the smallest amount of change of, in terms of happiness and joy and, among the people that I share this experience with here today. You know what I mean? That was my truth. I had to discover that and live up to that on my own. You know what I mean? You yourself, you have your own truth, and it's going to vary wildly among each and every single person on this planet. We all have a purpose. We all have a meaning. And that meaning can be used to it could be used for good. It could be, well, quote unquote good or quote unquote bad. It's, again, there is no good and evil in Nahuatl philosophy. So in this particular sense, we're framing it in terms of building new worlds. Like, we want the new world because we're the ones fucking suffering at the expense of the old world. But the people who are benefiting from the old world, they obviously don't want a new world. They want to maintain the current world. So it would be good for us to rid this new world, obviously, because we are the ones fucking suffering at its expense. But it would in turn be bad for the people who benefit from the old world, and they don't want that to happen. So they're just constantly, it's a dance, if you will, trying to harness the energy in one way to the other. And right now, we're down bad, homie. We're down bad. They got all the momentum. They got all the energy helping them continue along the old world. But again, the point of hood philosophy is to try to divert some of that energy and try to move it in such a way where we help build a new, better world that would hopefully be in our favor, right? So this truth then that the Nahuatl philosophy is speaking about, of course, that's our purpose for being here, homie. Why are we here? What is our purpose? Only in answering these questions can we live a life of meaning. And ideally, only in doing so can we claw our way out of this Western reductive nihilistic pit of despair that wants us to believe that we ain't shit more than insignificant particles floating through fucking a mechanical infinite universe. You know what I mean? Hence why, for humans here on Earth, without a well-formed heart and face, the question of our own truth is the most pressing. This pursuit, dog, is of mad importance as it embraces our reality. It embraces our origin. It embraces our personality. And perhaps most importantly, it embraces our final destiny here on Tlalticpac. So again, this is why, the problem of how to answer this question is of central importance to Nahuatl. For the Tlamatini, the religious approach that I mentioned before, the philosophical suicide and shit, this was rejected by most, okay? As the quote unquote giver of life, or this whole it's God's will shit, it's always appeared to be inexorably connected to this view. This view of like, what's the whole meaning and purpose of life? There's a grander entity out there that'll give meaning and purpose for you. Like, the Nahuatl, most of them, I say most of them because I don't want to centralize. I don't fucking, you have to talk to every single one. And that's obviously not a possibility, but it just doesn't vibe with their philosophy, dog, because this idea of like, oh, it's God's will, the giver of life, that implies some sort of teleology and some sort of fucking agency, which Teot has. It doesn't have either. As I mentioned before, Teot is a non-agentive, non-teleological entity. It is just the unfolding of reality. You know what I mean? That can be influenced for, a particular benefit or other, but ultimately it's not, actively going out of its way. That's Western Christian European thinking. Okay. So that particular response to the question of the meaning and purpose of life was rejected, right? By most Lamatini. And reason, to be fair, it did not fare much better. For if everything on earth changes and is dreamlike, the ultimate question of whether truth can be had on earth, it remains unanswerable. There's no point in trying to address this in a I don't want to say logical or rational way, because I'm not trying to imply that the Nahuatl were irrational or illogical. Like, that's fucking nonsense. They were obviously highly critically fucking adept. Okay. They had the ability to think critically, logically, rationally. The fact that they even had to emphasize this is fucking disgusting to me, right? Because it's just like, it feeds into this idea that we were somehow primitive. Like, no, that's not why they rejected it. They were, again, highly advanced scientists. They fucking knew what the fuck was up. They rejected it because they just didn't feel that it was a viable way to answer the question of why we are here in a world that is in a constant state of flux, okay? So, in addressing this issue, there's 3 prominent issues that emerged, okay, as a progression, it seems. And the first is that of hedonism that is born of intellectual despair. And this is where I feel that Camus just that's where he stopped at, right? When it comes to this whole fucking question of rebelling against the absurd. That's where I feel that that's where he's like, okay, this is it. Like, I'm good here, right? But there's more to it than that. And that's just something I feel it's one of the many things that is Camusian philosophy lacks, right? The second point that, the answer of the 3 that emerged from the Nahuatl was a form of intuitionism, okay, through which poetry and the use of metaphor as a means by which to express the reality that was revealed to man by Teot figured prominently, right? When I say this intuitionism, again, this is completely against the Western tradition of philosophy they would never accept intuition as a logical fucking, literally in terms of logic, right? As a logical justification for the foundation of their epistemology. But this Nahuatl philosophy, it's obviously not Western or Christian. And they're saying, yes, intuitionism can, in fact, serve to reveal to us many truths. Not by way of rationality, but by way of immersing oneself into existence. There is only one. Again, I got to continue to emphasize this when it comes to Teot, when it comes to reality as a whole. There is only one thing, and that is Teot. Okay? So when we say this, immersing ourselves intuitively, what it's saying is allow the reality to be expressed to and through you, essentially, right? Which is the whole act of the floricanto, this fucking song and flower, the fucking insochit, inquicat, okay? Now, this is where we mean that it's revealed to us, reality is revealed to us by Teot, okay? And last but not least, there was a theory of man as both a face and a heart, okay? Now, what that means is that the supreme ideal should be the development of a wise countenance and a heart as firm as a rock. Our heart is what directs us. It is what guides us. It is literally our life's fucking source. It is the fucking, you know what I mean? I've mentioned before in previous podcasts, the role of importance the heart plays in Nahuatl, okay? So the goal then is to make the heart strong because it is what's going to lead us through this slippery journey of life on Tlalticpac, okay? Now, this particular view, it perceives us as a beggar of sorts, okay? As beggars who are in need of light. And by light, obviously, it is meant here as a truth, right? Now, according to this view, both could be found along the path of Insochit, in kuikat, or the flower in song, right? Basically what happens is that this flower in song, they place the sacred energy of Teot in man's heart, making it true and causing it to create art, right? Or more specifically, a life of art. Now, obviously, if you followed along this podcast long enough, or maybe you yourself are just versed in Nietzschean philosophy, you'll know that I've mentioned before how I believe that Nietzsche is like the first fucking Western tradition of philosophy to break through the fucking ideology of the Western Christian world and peep into that of the fucking Nahuatl philosophers, right? The Nahuatl philosophers obviously predated Nietzsche by thousands of years. And because of that, I say that Nietzsche is a Nahuatl philosopher and not the other way around. But the point is, if you're familiar with Nietzsche on your own, independently, or through this podcast, you'll know that I've mentioned before how his fucking ethics, if you will, are an aesthetics, right? And what I mean by that is the whole point of making life a work of art. Like live your life as it were a work, as if you were the creator of a work of art, so that the process of creating the work of art, as well as the actual work of art, is a reflection of you as a person, right? This is fucking word for word, bar for bar, what the Nahuatl philosophers are saying. Because again, there is only one in monism. So Teot is literally us. We are Teot. The sacred energy manifested itself, and we are painting Teot on the fucking into reality, if you will. The reality is the grand cosmos is the fucking the reality upon which Teot itself is painted on. They'll say that the reality, the grand cosmos, is a fucking amoxtli. It's a blank slate of paper, and Teot is just painting the fucking the grand cosmos of reality on this blank paper. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what that's the idea that they're getting at here. We ourselves, we are artists, we are creators, we are fucking, we are painters of life, and the act and the process thereof, as well as the end product, is indicative of who and how we are as people. Okay. Now, in terms of the actual works of art that we've created, I don't want to say better or the greater because that implies some sort of hierarchy, but I would say instead more well ordered, the more aesthetically pleasing in terms of this Nahuatl philosophy, I guess, in terms of aesthetically appealing, I guess, right, is the best way I can try to convey this idea. In terms of Nahuatl philosophy, is the more concentrated of sacred energy of Teot it would be. Right? So, for instance, I have spoken before about the prominence of like beads and stones, okay? And how they represent the ultimate concentration of Teot, especially the jade ones, right? And so the idea then is to cultivate the same within our hearts, right? The more, the jade stones specifically, they're highly concentrated of Teot. And because of that, they're supremely fucking sacred. The goal then is to do the same with our hearts by harnessing the sacred energy of Teot and making strong our heart in such a way where it will be just as sacred and powerful as a jade stone, okay? So it should go without saying, however, that, cultivating this power is not a fucking easy process, my G. Like, it's not difficult. I mean, rather, it is not easy. It's supremely difficult. And so difficult, obviously, that for many people, it's kind of just like, ugh, why bother, right? But the whole point of bothering is that is the battle. That is the battle of life. Like, the battle is only to make ourselves stronger, our hearts stronger, our faces stronger, our countenance stronger, right? Anyways, in this view, again, the artist appears as a person with the sacred concentration in their heart, one who is in possession of the truth and, by proxy, the very roots of being. Notice the word I use here to emphasize, roots. And that is because the whole point is to try to establish roots in Nahuatl philosophy on a slippery earth so that we can fucking have a firm foundation of what it is and why it is that we are here, okay? We do so by having this deified heart, okay? And that we converse with this deified heart in such a way that, it may give to us the divine quality to things, the divine quality of existence. Our heart will be that which provides us this fucking divine quality of existence, okay? So again, when I talk about Nietzsche as a Nahuatl, this is exactly along the lines of what I mean, dog. This is clearly an aesthetic approach to life, right? Much like Nietzsche's, with a critical distinction again being that it's predated him by thousands of years, homie. Anyways, moving on. The Tlamatini they taught, okay, that, and in turn they educated others to awaken, if you will. Not if you will, this is the actual quote. It's to awaken their own window to the universe, our heart, okay? To awaken in their hearts a thirst for the light, the truth, and the creative power of Teon. And with this move, we begin to see humans actively, okay? As in, again, in Xochitl in Cuicat, or the flower and song, right? This is, again, the best way that I can explain this fucking flower and song, in Xochitl in Cuicat, is by this famous Nahuatl aphorism that, that asks, who am I? As a bird, I fly about. I sing of flowers. I compose songs, butterflies of songs. Let them burst forth from my soul. And I scare quote soul because there's no soul in Nahuatl, but the idea, my inner essence, okay? Let my heart be delighted with them. The basic idea of this poem is that by allowing the butterflies of song to be born within us, we can begin to express that which is true on earth, right? Now, given the subjective nature of truth in Nahuatl, this, of course, is expressed in different forms that varies among individuals, all with the same intention, homie. Discovering one's own truth and by proxy, that of existence, because it's the same fucking thing. The truth about reality is the truth about our being, because in monism, I cannot continue to emphasize this. There is but one, okay? So again, Nahuatl philosophy, it revolves around an aesthetic conception of the universe and life, homie, because, art specifically made things divine, and only the divine is true. And to know this truth was to understand the hidden meanings of things by way, again, of in Xochitl in Cuicat, the power emanating from the deified heart. This, of course, essentially is akin to the role that meditation plays in many Eastern philosophies. Now, one of the reasons Eastern thought isn't plagued with many of the nihilistic lamentations of Western thought is because, while many of these Eastern philosophies are dualist in nature, they believe that a symbiosis can be had by way of meditating. Now, this is obviously a very, very simplistic reading of this issue. It's far more complex than this. But the basic idea is that we, as humans, can become one with reality by meditating. Now, obviously, there's mad differences between Eastern thought and Nahuatl thought, chief among which being that the Nahuatl, I cannot continue to emphasize this enough, are monist. But the general principle in terms of the role of meditating, it kind of remains, okay? It's a clumsy metaphor, but it works, okay? And instead of meditating, however, what we're doing is that we are channeling, as opposed to becoming one with, the sacred energy of Teon. Because again, becoming one with implies some sort of division, right? So instead, we are channeling. Meditating, so it's not like meditating, okay? Because we're not becoming one with, because the sacred energy of Teon, I should say, it implies a monism. And the whole point then is that we're going to challenge it. We're channel it. Sorry. Okay. We're going to learn to channel this sacred energy of Teon, through our own subjective song and flower. Every single person on this earth has their own meaning for why we're here. The goal is to find that meaning and purpose, and then in turn, learn to channel the sacred energy of Teon through our own personal song and flower. So for me, this podcast is one of the ways in which I do so. Doing jujitsu, as I've spoken about before in the past, it's one of the ways that I do so. There's plenty of ways that it can be done even among individuals. And the idea is that the goal is to perfect it in such a way that we become master artists who create these stunning works of art, including with our lives. You know what I mean? That this is the process of painting these fucking, the stunning work of art, of ordering in a very well way our lives, okay? That lead them to become these stunning works of art that will in turn, in at least Nahuatl, be considered as such because, again, they are better ordered than those created by less experienced artists. Less experienced here being those who have never learned to channel the fucking in Xochitl in Cuicat. Maybe they have a natural proclivity towards it, but they never fucking developed it in such a way that enabled them to become master artists, as opposed to those who, we go out of our way to not only discover it, but to battle, if you will, every day to, perfect it in such a way that, makes us these better fucking well-ordered artists. Okay. And as such, we create these works of art that, it's like a simultaneous process where not only do we create these works of art, but we ourselves become so deified where, we have such a high concentration of teot where, we ourselves are the works of art. And because of this, they're, well ordered and, in such a way where they are like the jade stones or these magnificent pyramids, considered to be sacred because they are, or more true even, because of how well ordered and thus aesthetically pleasing they are, right? Now, this in turn is going to reveal another distinction between Eastern thought, and that is that unlike the passive act of meditating, Insochit Inquikal is an active process. You're not just fucking sitting there. I'm not trying to bash meditation, dog. Meditation is great if that's your thing. Like fucking do your thing, homie. Okay. But one of the reasons, me personally, why I could never I try, but I just cannot. I cannot sit and fucking I just cannot sit there and do nothing. You know what I mean? Now, to the fucking meditation's credit, they'll say that part of that's my fault. I mean, I need to learn to be able to fucking be able to sit peacefully with my thoughts and my, and all that kind of shit, to which I say, I get that as well. But what I'm saying is that me personally, I find the peace that, I am told those who meditate, have by way of active processes like jujitsu. When I'm fucking sitting there trying to choke a motherfucker or avoid being choked out myself, I'm at peace. I have like this fucking Zen-like moment, like where nothing in life matters except that particular moment. And obviously that is an active process. So this is what I mean by the distinction between this fucking two thoughts. And that is that consider how if teot is in a constant state of movement, right? It stands to reason that the act of channeling teot is the same. It's an active process. You know what I mean? Now, excuse me. This leads us to the importance of well-ordered lives in Nahuatl philosophy and how in turn their ethics were centered around this idea. Okay. Because again, the better ordered one's personal life is, ultimately, this implies, the closer it is to the sacred on the spectrum. The more better, well-ordered it is, that the more it enables you to fucking create these beautiful works of art, right? That in turn reveal to us the truth of reality. Now, it is because of this that the Nahuatl Lamatini ultimately sought to give wise faces to human beings, okay? It is why they sought to awaken in them the desire to steal flowers and songs, quote unquote, right? It was the Tlamatini's duty to place a mirror before the people, to endow them with wisdom so that the face might be assumed and developed. This is the whole role of the fucking obsidian mirror and Tezcatlipoca and the sacred jaguar and all that kind of shit. You know what I mean? The fact that the Nahuatl Lamatini felt it necessary to do so implies that, it implies the Nahuatl belief that humans, we come to this earth faceless. And by that, we mean born anonymous and without an identity. And inherent in this was the understanding that as, creatures, again, going back to the very beginning of the episode, as creatures who crave meaning, we would ultimately, inherently be on an eager quest for a face, for meaning, right? For self-identification. So much so that we would willingly plunge ourselves, or perhaps unwillingly or unwittingly, I should say, willingly or perhaps unwittingly, plunge ourselves into a questionable existence on Tlalticpac just to have one. This is, again, the whole point of the philosophical suicide. I don't need Christianity to help fucking assuage the pain inherent with the Western, the zenith point of the reductive Western Christian world. I don't need that. That's philosophical suicide. I don't need to plunge myself into a fucking anything that gives me comfort because, for the sake of appeasing this desire that we have for purpose, just to fucking quell that desire, right? I don't need that. That's going to ultimately do nothing more than plunge me into a questionable existence here on Tlalticpac. Christianity is a very passive philosophy, as we discussed previously with the Nietzschean episode. It is not an active fucking philosophy that embraces the will to power or embraces the constant flux of teot, if you will, right? I don't need that. Okay, what I need instead is to help find my purpose and then just direct my energy in such a way that helps manifest that purpose in my life, right? I don't need to surrender our hearts to all things, to quote the famous fucking Nahuatl quote, a poem by Nahuatl, right? I don't need to give my hearts to all things, to lead it nowhere, okay? Because in doing so, we are in fact losing it. Namely because on earth, it is difficult to inspire to anything of significance, right? Hence, again, the importance of ordering our lives in such a way that would allow us to do so, right? Now, because of this, we find ourselves in a precarious position as creatures that are born without an identity, right? Because again, we are full of these unsatisfied desires, but again, we lack a definite goal here on Tlaltikpak. That's the whole point that I'm trying to make with this Camusian rolling the fucking boulder up and down the hill shit. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you're rolling the boulder up and down, but for what purpose? For what meaning? Just to simply rebel against the absurdity of existence? Nah, homie. The boulder that I'm rolling every single day is fucking trying to develop this hood philosophy to share with the world. You know what I mean? In hopes that doing so, I'm trying to be of service to people. You know what I mean? And this is the way that I feel as though I can potentially be so. But I can only fucking do this if my life is well ordered in such a way that enables me to sit down and fucking write this philosophy. Sit down and write these fucking podcast episodes. Sit down and read this shit. Sit down and intellectualize it. Sit down and podcast it. Sit down and chop up the clips that allow me to share it with you on social media and shit. You know what I mean? That's not possible if my life is fucking chaos. If I'm fucking out fucking, just partying every single night because I wake up hungover. I don't want to fucking do it. It's like, it's complex. Your life's got to be well ordered and structured in such a way that enables you to do so. And that's just me. Like, you have your shit too. You know what I mean? And then the better ordered your life is, the more enabled you are to be able to manifest that purpose. Okay. The more, you're able to fucking solidify and deify your heart and strengthen the countenance of your face. You know what I mean? And thus, in doing so, escape slowly but surely from this fucking pit of nihilistic despair inherent in the Western Christian world. So when it comes to this fucking hood philosophy shit, dog, an answer to the question then, because of all, framing it in terms of everything I just said, an answer to the question of, well, why study philosophy? The answer is simple, homie. To help us develop a heart and a face, a strong heart and a face, so that we're not fucking stuck in this pit of nihilistic despair, right? So that we can escape from it, if you will. Now, with this philosophical foundation, just in wrapping shit up, okay? I'm almost to the end here. With this philosophical foundation laid, it's easy to see how it can in turn be applied in a practical manner. So take, for instance, again, the problem of suicide. In the Western world, Camus tells us, again, that it's the only question of importance in philosophy. This hood philosophy shit, dog, like I'm picking up on that very idea and I'm expanding on it, again, by examining the ways that we got to this point in further detail. And one of those ways, unquestionably, is the alienation many of us feel for our inability to find comforting answers to the massive questions in life that are given to us through the Western world, right? Again, if you follow this fucking chain of rational outcomes through this Western Christian world, you get to where Nietzsche and Camus got to. This whole God is dead and wants to kill, God is God is dead and now the world is split into two kinds of people because of it. Those who want to kill themselves because of the unhappiness that the death of God causes, and those who want to kill other people also because of the unhappiness that this death of God causes. That's where Nietzsche and Camus get to, okay? It's pretty simple. And as I mentioned before, these answers and all the other ones that are offered by the Western world, they're unsatisfying, dog. They're unsatisfying to me. They're unsatisfying to many people on this earth that I've at least been able to see by way of social media, okay? Which is part of the impetus for this hood philosophy shit, dog. To move beyond the stranglehold that this fucking Western tradition of philosophy has on us. So that we can, again, create new, better shit that doesn't fucking inherit all the problems of this old world, dog. Again, this is a small part of what it takes to build a new, better world, right? This hood philosophy shit, but I've accepted this role and I'm okay with it, okay? Because I truly do believe that if we want to build this new, better world, again, as I've been emphasizing, we cannot continue to import the shit from the old world. And that includes the people, all right? And if you ask me personally, people like myself, definitely, we're very unhappy. We're, very unfulfilled. So if we're just going to import these old people into this new world, it's just going to lead to the same shit. So the goal then with this hood philosophy shit is to help inspire, inspire us, me personally for sure, right? And I share it with you in hopes that it'll do the same, us to live happier, more fulfilled lives. Obviously, these answers weren't available in the Western world, so we look to my ancestral world instead, and we use that philosophy to help us do so, right? Because again, this Western world, dog, it's just not going to produce the people that are necessary to build this new, better world that we all envision, okay? But I am convinced that Nahuatl and hood philosophy can, because both offer this inclusivity and applicability that they're simply not found in the Western tradition, dog, right? What I mean by that is that, by discovering these Nahuatl philosophers and their philosophies, I personally feel that we discover an openness and an understanding, and perhaps most importantly, a solace that we've all pined for. And if it's not in the form of like actual hard and true answers, I believe it's in the process of trying to discover them. The battle again, the constant battle, right? Of trying to discover them without having to simply resort to some sort of dogmatism like Christianity, philosophical suicide, right? As this clearly, it's never been an option for people like you and I, let alone a solution, dog. Come on now, okay? So, in engaging in this fucking process of insochit incuicat, we find the root of these problems that we've obsessed over our entire lives, and how they have been attempted to be reconciled throughout the course of history, and how that process inevitably leads us to where we are today. I firmly believe, simply, I guess I'm just going to keep it fucking simple, and in order to wrap this bitch up, that through his ancestral Nahuatl philosophy and my hood philosophy shit too, I'm not going to sell myself short, okay? That it's going to help us, dog. It can help us. It's helped me, which is why I'm not going to sell myself short. Rid myself of the fucking, not just the people that have kept me from, becoming a better version of myself. Again, going back to that whole ostracization inherent with leaving the Western world, but also help me realize that the people in the Western world in general, dog, was nothing more than like a psychic vampire, if you will, that was holding me down, bro. And once I was able to accept this, it helped me, I guess, in a way, not to sound so fucking, I don't know, it's just weird for me to say, but I guess gratuitous. I'm not trying to sound fucking like overinflated here, but I'm just saying, like, it helped find myself, dog. It helped to discover the things that I truly love and value, as opposed to the things that, I was socialized to believe that I loved and valued, okay? Or the ones that I was told that were correct simply because of the particular culture that I was born into. Like, that shit is arbitrary, homie, and it could have just as easily been any other way, going back to the whole relativism shit that I was talking about earlier. So the point here being is that when we step back and examine that self that we've been socialized with, that socialized self, and we realize that it's not really our true self, bro. This realization, it creates the opening necessary for us to recover our existence, okay? And, in peeling back, if you will, the primary veil, we reveal the alienation that is born of this divided self, this self that feels unhappy with the self that we were socialized with, you know what I mean? And is pining for an answer, and willing to give our heart and, our face to anything that provides an answer. Like, no, that is not good. Don't just give your heart away, dog. Use this opportunity to fucking direct it towards, manifesting the purpose that it is that you are here for. It's going to be difficult to find. It's going to be difficult to do. But in doing so, you're going to create the ability to learn to channel by way of insochit incuicat, this fucking sacred energy of Te'o that will reveal to us all the answers that it is that we have been pining for, and give us the root necessary to establish some form of existence, of meaning here on Tlaltikpak, right? The slippery earth of Tlaltikpak, right? And I'm convinced, homie, that it is from here where our discourse into genuine happiness can truly begin. Not a moment sooner, only after having gone through all this process. And yeah, I guess this is as good a point as any to go ahead and wrap this bitch up. Quite a lengthy podcast for today, and I do appreciate you sticking with me to the very end. And yeah, I'll see you all next time. And until then, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.